The October sun bled across the Nevada sky like a wound that refused to close, burnt orange melting into crimson, the kind of light that made everything look like it was dying. The asphalt shimmered with heat even as the day surrendered to evening, and the desert held its breath the way it always did before something broke. The sound came first, not the engine, not the voices. The sound of ceramic hitting pavement, shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. Then laughter, the cruel kind that doesn't fade, the kind that burrows into your chest and lives there. Dorothy Blackwood stood frozen in the parking lot of Magnolia's diner, her hands trembling so badly she had to press them against her chest just to keep them still. 79 years old, and she'd survived things that would have broken younger women. Widowhood at 35, raising a son alone on a waitress's salary, watching that son go to war twice and come back with eyes that had seen too much. But standing here watching her dinner scattered across the gravel meatloaf and mashed potatoes mixing with dirt and broken glass, she felt more afraid than she'd been in decades. I said, "Get out, old woman." The voice belonged to Garrett Brennan, 28 years old and proud of exactly nothing that mattered. He stood with 5 other boys pretending to be men, their phones out and recording, always recording, proof of existence measured in views and likes and the fear in an old woman's eyes. "This is our spot," Garrett continued louder, now playing to the cameras. "You don't belong here." Dorothy's lips moved, but no words came. Her arthritis made her fingers curl inward like claws, and she pressed them harder against her sternum, trying to hold her heart in place, trying to remember how to breathe. "What's the matter?" one of the others called out. "Can't hear us. Maybe you should stay home where it's safe." More laughter. The phones angled closer. Dorothy turned to leave, moving as fast as her old bones would allow. And that's when it happened. The bracelet, the silver one her grandmother had worn through World War II, that her mother had worn through Korea, that Dorothy herself had worn for 60 years, slipped from her wrist and hit the pavement with a sound like a bell ringing underwater. She stopped, bent down, reached for it. Garrett's boot got there first. He stepped on it, deliberately grinding his heel against the asphalt, and Dorothy looked up at him with tears she refused to let fall. "Please," she whispered. "It belonged to my grandmother." "Your grandmother." Garrett picked up the bracelet, held it to the light, squinted at the engraving. 3 names, 3 generations, 3 women who'd learned to be strong because the alternative was breaking. "Looks like junk for junk." He walked to the trash can by the door, held the bracelet up for his phone's camera, and let it drop into the garbage. The sound it made falling among the coffee grounds and crumpled napkins was the sound of something sacred being profaned. "No," Dorothy breathed, but it came out so quiet that even she could barely hear it. Garrett and his crew climbed into their trucks, still laughing, still filming, and drove away, leaving Dorothy standing in the parking lot with her dinner on the ground and her grandmother's bracelet in the trash and absolutely no idea what to do about any of it. She stood there until the sun finished dying, until the sky turned purple and the first stars appeared, until Maggie O'Brien came out from behind the counter and found her. "Dorothy, honey, what happened?" But Dorothy couldn't answer. She just shook her head and walked to her car and drove home in silence, her hands still trembling on the wheel. She didn't tell anyone. Not that night. What would she say? That she'd been terrorized by boys young enough to be her grandsons, that she was too afraid to go back and retrieve her most precious possession, that she felt small and helpless and ashamed. No, she'd stay quiet. She'd stay home. She'd be safe. But 3 days later, when her son called to check on her like he did every Thursday, Dorothy Blackwood made a mistake. She tried to lie to a man who'd spent 22 years learning to read the silences between words. 60 miles away in a garage that smelled like motor oil and old leather, Marcus Blackwood knelt beside his 1995 Harley Road King and felt the first whisper that something was wrong. The bike gleamed even in the dim light. 29 years he'd owned in this machine. Longer than most marriages lasted, longer than most promises held. He'd bought it used in '97 with his combat payback when the nightmares were fresh, And the only thing that helped was the open road and the engine's steady thunder drowning out the sound of things he couldn't forget. His phone rang. Mom. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Ma, what's up? A pause. Too long. Marcus's spine straightened. 22 years in the Marines had taught him to read silences the way other people read books. Marcus! Her voice was thin, stretched over something she was trying to hide. I'm fine, sweetheart. I was thinking maybe I won't go to Magnolia's for dinner today. Marcus set down the wrench. You love Magnolia's. You go every Thursday. I know, I don't want to be a burden. Maybe I'll eat at home tonight. Ma. He kept his voice gentle, the way you'd talk to someone standing too close to a ledge. What happened? Nothing happened. I'm just tired. But there was something else beneath the words. Not tiredness. Fear. His mother, who'd raised him alone after his father died, who'd worked 2 jobs and never once complained, who'd stood in the doorway and watched her only son deployed to Iraq and then Afghanistan without shedding a single tear in front of him, was afraid. Ma, talk to me. Another pause. He could hear her breathing shallow and quick. I dropped something there a few days ago. Grandma's bracelet. The silver one with the 3 names. You remember it? Marcus remembered. His great-grandmother had worn it while her husband fought in the Pacific. His grandmother had worn it while hers served in Korea. His mother had worn it through the long decades of raising him alone. Where'd you drop it? At Magnolia's. But it's okay. It's just a bracelet. I don't need it. The words hit like a punch. His mother, who treasured that bracelet more than anything she owned, was telling him she didn't need it, which meant something had happened. Something bad enough that she was willing to abandon her most precious possession rather than face it. Why not? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would make him angry. Dorothy's breath caught. There were some boys there, young men. They said things, laughed. I dropped the bracelet when I was leaving, and one of them, he kicked it under the table, said something about trash belonging in the trash. Marcus's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. Which boys? It doesn't matter. Ma, which boys? Please, Marcus. I don't want you getting in trouble. You know you can't. You're still on probation with the club. One more incident, and Clayton said they would have to. I know what Clayton said. Marcus closed his eyes. 3 years ago, he'd put a man in the hospital. The man had deserved it, probably. But the problem with PTSD was that sometimes your brain couldn't tell the difference between a drunk grabbing your shoulder in a bar and an enemy combatant coming at you in the dark. Sometimes the war followed you home, and you couldn't always control when it took over. The Hells Angels had rules. You wore the patch. You represented the patch. You brought heat on the club. You lost the patch. He'd been given one more chance. Just one. Tell me about the boys, Ma. Dorothy sighed, the sound of a woman who knew her son too well to think he'd let this go. I think one of them was Lionel Brennan's son, the real estate man, the one who's been trying to buy up all the property on this side of town. The boy had a jacket on, some kind of security company logo. Marcus opened his eyes. Lionel Brennan, of course. The king of small-time corruption wrapped in expensive suits and planning commission meetings. A man who'd never built anything but knew exactly how to tear down everything others had built. I'll handle it, Marcus said. Marcus, no, please. It's just a bracelet. It's not about the bracelet, Ma. There was a long silence. When Dorothy spoke again, her voice was small, young, the voice of someone who'd run out of strength for fighting. I don't want you to get hurt, baby. Not for me. Marcus looked at the challenge coins sitting on his workbench. 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. It wasn't just a motto. It was the only thing that separated men from animals. Loyalty to your unit, your family, the people who couldn't protect themselves. I'll be careful, he said. I promise, Vice. After he hung up, Marcus stood in the garage for a long moment. On the wall hung a photograph in a cheap frame. Him and Dorothy taken 2 years ago at the diner. She was smiling, really smiling. The kind of smile that made all the hard years worth it. He'd failed people before. In Iraq when he'd followed orders instead of his conscience. When he'd left James Morrison behind. The memory came back sharp and bitter. 1991. Desert Storm. Morrison had been a specialist with the 1st Marine Division, a kid from Montana who'd somehow gotten separated from his unit during the chaos of the ground war. He'd helped Marcus's squad find water, guided them through a minefield, asked for their help getting back to American lines. But Marcus's orders had been clear, secure, the objective maintain operational security, no stragglers. And Morrison wasn't his responsibility, wasn't his mission. So Marcus had left him there, had watched the kid's face crumble with disbelief as the Humvees rolled away, had told himself it was the right call, the professional call. 3 days later, they'd found Morrison's body, executed, left in the sand as a warning. Marcus had carried that weight for 35 years. The knowledge that following orders, doing the smart thing, had gotten an innocent man killed. A man who trusted him, a man who deserved better. He wouldn't fail again. Not his mother. Not ever. Marcus grabbed his leather vest and headed for the door. Route 66 had been dying for decades, bleeding out slowly as the interstate system sucked away the lifeblood of small-town America. But there were still places that refused to die with dignity. Magnolia's Diner was one of them. The building dated back to 1952, all chrome and glass and faded dreams. The neon sign out front had been flickering since 1987, but nobody bothered to fix it anymore. It has character, Maggie O'Brien always said. Character meant it was broken, but still standing. Marcus pulled into the parking lot and killed the engine. For a moment, he just sat there breathing, remembering what his VA counselor had taught him. Count to 10. Identify your surroundings. Remind yourself where you are, when you are. You are in Nevada. It is 2026. The war ended 35 years ago. You are safe. Except he'd never been safe. None of them had. You don't come back from war. You just learn to live next to it. He walked through the front door. The bell chimed. Conversation didn't stop. Magnolia's wasn't that kind of place, but heads turned. They always did when a Hell's Angel walked in, part curiosity, part caution, part respect for men who'd chosen a life outside the lines society drew. Behind the counter stood Maggie herself, 64 years old, built like someone who'd wrestled life to the ground and won on points. Her husband had been Air Force killed in a training accident in '98. She'd taken his death benefits and bought this diner, turned it into a shrine for every veteran who'd ever needed a place where the coffee was strong and the judgment was weak. The walls were covered in photographs, black and white images of men in uniform spanning from World War II to Afghanistan. Some of them were dead. Most of them were just old. All of them had found a home here, at least for a while. Marcus, Maggie said, setting down the coffee pot. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Wasn't expecting you today. Hey, Maggie, need to ask you about something. Her expression flickered. If this is about the other day, it is. Maggie glanced toward the back corner where a security camera pointed at the dining area. Marcus, I don't want trouble. Neither do I, but my mother's afraid to come back here. That's trouble enough. Maggie's jaw tightened. She picked up a rag and started wiping down the counter, even though it was already clean. Busy hands, quiet mind. It's been happening for 2 weeks now. Those boys, 6 of them usually, they come in, take the big booth order, barely anything, and just sit there making people uncomfortable. Garrett Brennan. Yeah, Lionel's kid and his buddies, they're not violent, not really, just mean. You know the type. She paused. They make comments, film people on their phones. Last week, they convinced old Mr. Henderson to leave just by staring at him and laughing. Tuesday, they pushed past Mrs. Kowalski. She fell, broke her wrist. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest, the kind of cold that used to come right before combat. She filed a report. Maggie shook her head. With Kyle Brennan as deputy sheriff, he's Garrett's younger brother. What do you think happened after that report? The system was broken. The system had never been built for people like them. Marcus knew that. He learned it in Iraq, watching politicians send young men to die for oil fields and then pretend it was about freedom. He'd learned it in courtrooms where lawyers made six figures defending corporations that poisoned small towns. He'd learned it every day of his life that being right didn't mean being protected. My mother dropped her bracelet here, Marcus said. The one from her grandmother. Maggie's face softened. The silver one with the names, yeah. Garrett kicked it under the table. Then he picked it up and she paused. He threw it in the trash, called it junk for old junk. The cold in Marcus's chest spread. His hands resting on the counter curled into fists. He watched them do it like they belonged to someone else. Control. He needed control. You got security footage. I do. But Marcus listened to me. Lionel Brennan owns half this town. He's got the sheriff in his pocket, the planning commission, half the city council. Those boys know they're untouchable. Nobody's untouchable. You're one man on probation with your own club. You go after those boys, Clayton will have to cut you loose. You know the rules. Marcus did know the rules. The Hells Angels weren't a gang. They were a brotherhood. But brotherhood had laws. You wore the patch. You represented the patch. You brought heat on the club, you lost the patch. Simple as that. But some things were simpler still. I need to see that footage, Marcus said, and I need to get that bracelet back. Maggie studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there made her sigh and nod toward the back office. Come on. The office was small and cramped, smelling of old paper and burnt coffee. An ancient desktop computer sat on a desk buried under receipts and order forms. Maggie pulled up the security software and clicked through the timestamps. There, she said. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Black and white. Timestamp Tuesday, 5:47 p.m. Dorothy Blackwood sat alone in a booth eating dinner. She looked small on the screen. Fragile. When had she gotten so old? Marcus remembered her as invincible, the woman who'd raised him alone after his father's death, who'd worked 2 jobs and still made it to every school play, every parent-teacher conference. When had she become the woman who could be frightened by cruel boys? The answer, of course, was that she'd always been capable of being frightened. She'd just never shown it because she had to be strong for him. On the screen, 6 young men approached her booth. The leader, Garrett Marcus, recognized him from around town and said something. Dorothy looked up startled. Garrett laughed. His friends laughed, recording on their phones. Then Garrett reached out and shoved Dorothy's plate off the table. Marcus's vision tunneled. His breathing slowed. This was the thing the counselors warned about. The red haze. The moment when your brain stopped being in Nevada and started being back in the desert where the rules were different and violence was the only language that worked. Count to 10. You are in Nevada. It is 2026. On the screen, Dorothy stood up, quickly fumbling with her purse. The bracelet fell from her wrist, hitting the floor. She didn't notice. She was too scared, too focused on getting away. Garrett saw it fall. He looked down at it, smiled. Then he stepped on it, ground his heel against it, kicked it under the table. One of his friends laughed and said something. The footage had no audio, but Marcus could read lips well enough. Trash belongs with trash. Garrett reached under the table, picked up the bracelet, and walked to the trash can by the door, held it up for his phone's camera, then dropped it in. The footage ended. Marcus realized he had stopped breathing. He forced air into his lungs, released his grip on the edge of the desk. His knuckles had gone white. You okay? Maggie asked quietly. No. Marcus stood up. But I will be. Can I get a copy of that? Already burned it to a flash drive. She handed him a small USB stick. But Marcus, what are you going to do with it? The police, what they got? I'm not going to the police. Then what? Marcus looked at her. I'm going to get my mother's bracelet back. And I'm going to make sure those boys understand that some people aren't as helpless as they look. You'll lose the patch. Maybe. Clayton won't have a choice. The club has rules. The club has rules, Marcus agreed. But I have rules too, and rule 1 is you don't let anyone hurt your family. He walked out of the office through the diner past the photographs of men who'd fought and bled and died for something bigger than themselves. Men who'd understood that honor wasn't about following the law. It was about doing what was right when the law failed. Outside, the sun was setting, the sky bleeding red and orange across the desert. Marcus stood beside his Harley for a moment, the flash drive in his pocket, the weight of choice settling on his shoulders. He could walk away, forget the bracelet, keep the patch, stay in the brotherhood that had saved his life when the nightmares got too loud. Or he could do what Marines did, protect the weak, stand up to bullies. Even when it cost you everything, there was never really a choice at all. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed. Yeah. Clayton Murphy's voice was rough, worn smooth by whiskey and motorcycle engines. Clayton, it's Marcus. I need to tell you something. This better not be what I think it is. I'm going to handle a situation. Personal, family matter. Might get loud. I wanted you to know first. A long silence. Marcus, don't do this. I have to. You have to keep your head down and your nose clean. Those were the terms. I know the terms, but this is my mother, Clayton. They scared her, humiliated her, stole from her. So call the cops. The cops are part of the problem. Another silence longer this time. If you do this, I'll have to cut you loose. You know that, right? No matter how I feel about it personally, the club has rules. I know. You're throwing away your patch for a bracelet. I'm honoring my patch by being the kind of man who deserves to wear it. Clayton sighed. You're a stubborn son of a bitch, Marcus. Semper Fi, brother. Semper Fi. Marcus hung up. He looked at the phone for a moment, then slipped it back into his pocket. The sun touched the horizon. The light turned blood red. Marcus Blackwood kicked his Harley to life and rode into the gathering darkness toward a confrontation that would change everything. Behind him, Magnolia's diner glowed like a beacon, a last outpost of something decent in a world that had forgotten what decency meant. And somewhere in that world, his mother sat alone, afraid to go to the place she loved, robbed of the last connection to her grandmother's memory. Not anymore. The motorcycle's engine roared. The desert swallowed the sound. And the story that had started with a shattered plate and a scared old woman began to unfold into something larger. Something that would test every promise Marcus had ever made. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain. Marcus rode toward it anyway. Some things were worth losing everything for. The confrontation came on Thursday evening exactly as Marcus had planned it. He walked into Magnolia's diner at 5:30, the same time his mother usually arrived for dinner. The same time Garrett Brennan and his crew had been showing up for the past 2 weeks. Patterns. Predators always had patterns. The bell chimed as Marcus pushed through the door. The diner was half full. Retirees mostly. People who remembered when Route 66 meant something. When America built things that lasted and honored the people who built them. Garrett and his 5 friends occupied the large corner booth, sprawled out like they owned the place. Phones on the table, cameras ready, always ready to document their cruelty, turn it into content, into proof that they mattered. Marcus walked straight toward them. The conversations around the diner faded. People knew what was coming. You didn't live this long without learning to read the air before a storm. Garrett looked up, annoyance flickering across his face before he recognized Marcus. Then something else appeared. Not quite fear, not yet, but awareness. The animal part of his brain registering that something dangerous had entered his territory. Can I help you, the old-timer? Garrett said it loud enough for his friends to hear, playing to the audience. The phone cameras turned on. Marcus stopped 3 feet from the table, close enough to see Garrett's pupils, far enough to keep his hands visible, controlled. My name is Marcus Blackwood, he said quietly. His voice carried anyway. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. I'm here for something that belongs to my mother. Garrett leaned back, spreading his arms across the booth's backrest. Your mother don't know her man. Dorothy Blackwood. She was sitting right where you are on Tuesday evening. You knocked her dinner onto the floor. You took her bracelet and threw it in the trash. One of Garrett's friends laughed. Dude, we don't know what you're talking about. Marcus didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on Garrett. In combat, you watch the leader. The others will follow his cues. The bracelet, Marcus said. Silver. 3 names engraved. My great-grandmother wore it through World War II. My grandmother through Korea. My mother for 60 years. I want it back. Garrett's smile widened. Even if I knew what you were talking about, which I don't, what makes you think I'd give it to you? You going to make me old man? The friend with the phone angled it to catch Marcus's face, waiting for the explosion, the viral moment. Old biker loses his temper, threatens innocent kids, gets arrested. That's the content they wanted. Violence that confirmed their worldview. That the old generation was dangerous needed to be pushed aside. Marcus felt the rage building, the familiar red tide rising behind his eyes. His hands wanted to curl into fists. His body wanted to move to strike, to hurt these boys the way they'd hurt his mother. But he'd been here before, in bars, in parking lots, in the darkness of his own bedroom, when the nightmares convinced him the enemy was still out there, still needed killing. He breathed, counted, reminded himself. I'm asking politely, Marcus said. One time, give me the bracelet, apologize to my mother, and this ends peacefully. Garrett stood up. He was tall, 6'1", 200 pounds of gym muscle and entitled anger. Or what, you going to fight all 6 of us at your age looking for a heart attack? Grandpa. Behind the counter, Maggie O'Brien's hand moved toward the phone. Marcus caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Not yet. I'm not going to fight anyone, Marcus said. I'm going to give you a choice. Do the right thing now or deal with the consequences later. Consequences? Garrett laughed. You know who my father is, Lionel Brennan. You know what my brother does, Deputy Sheriff Kyle Brennan. You really think you can threaten me and walk away? Marcus nodded slowly. I see. Your father's money, your brother's marriage. That's what makes you brave? Take those away. You're just scared boys playing dress-up. Garrett's face flushed red. You don't know anything about me. I know you pick on old women because they can't fight back. I know you film it because cruelty is the only thing that makes you feel important. I know you're exactly what's wrong with this country. People with power and no honor. The words landed like slaps. Garrett's jaw clenched. His friend shifted uncomfortably. They'd been called out, named, defined, and the truth of it stung worse than any insult. Get out, Garrett said, before I call my brother and have you arrested for harassment. Call him, Marcus said. I'll wait. For a moment, the standoff held. 6 young men against 1 older one. Phones recording, witnesses watching. The whole scene balanced on the edge of violence. Then the door opened. Deputy Kyle Brennan walked in, hand resting casually on his service weapon. 26 years old with his brother's face but meaner eyes. The kind of cop who joined the force for the power, not the service. Marcus Blackwood, Kyle said, his voice carrying false friendliness. Heard you might be causing trouble here. No trouble, Marcus said. Just asking for my property back. Your property. Kyle glanced at Garrett, who shrugged innocently. These young men say you've been harassing them, threatening them. That true? I asked for a bracelet they stole from my mother. You got proof of that? Receipt? A police report? I have security footage. Kyle's smile didn't waver. Security footage can be misleading, angles, lighting, all kinds of things can make innocent actions look bad. But what I see right now, clear as day, is a known Hells Angels member with a history of violence threatening 6 upstanding citizens. The trap was perfect. Garrett had called ahead, gotten his brother here, made sure the official record would show Marcus as the aggressor. And with Marcus on probation from the club, any arrest would mean losing his patch, losing the only family he had left besides his mother. I think you should leave, Kyle said, before the situation escalates and I have to take you in. You know you can't afford another incident, Marcus. Your friends at the Angels made that real clear to the department. Marcus looked at Garrett. At the smug satisfaction on the boy's face, at the phone still recording, capturing this moment of humiliation. His mother's bracelet somewhere in this building treated like garbage, while the people who'd taken it stood protected by money and badges in a system that had never cared about people like Dorothy Blackwood. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to make Garrett pay, to show these boys what happened when you hurt the wrong person's family. But fighting wasn't winning, not here, not now. Marcus took a slow breath and nodded. I'm leaving. But Garrett, he looked directly at the young man. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. That's a threat, Kyle said sharply. I heard that threat. It's a promise, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. He turned and walked out of the diner. Behind him, he heard Garrett's laughter, heard the mocking voices, heard the phones clicking, capturing his retreat. The bell chimed as the door closed. Outside, the autumn air was cool. Marcus stood beside his Harley, hands shaking with suppressed rage. He'd done the right thing. Walked away. Kept control. It felt like losing. His phone buzzed. A text from Clayton Murphy. Heard what happened. Proud of you for walking away. Don't do anything stupid. Marcus stared at the message. Then he looked back at the diner, at the lights inside, at the shadows of the boys still laughing. Walking away wasn't enough. It never had been. He needed a different kind of fight. The next morning, Marcus began building his army. First stop was Wallace Patterson's house, a small ranch-style home on the edge of town. Wallace answered the door in a bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, looking like 61 fell on a Friday morning. Marcus, Wallace said, surprise and concern mixing on his face. Little early for social calls. Need your help, Doc. They'd served together, not in the same unit, but in the same war. Wallace had been a Navy corpsman attached to Marine units, the guy who ran into gunfire to pull wounded men to safety. He'd saved Marcus's life in Iraq, dragged him out of a burning Humvee while rounds cracked overhead. Some debts you never stopped owing. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and old memories. Photos on the walls showed a younger Wallace in uniform, then later in paramedic gear. He'd come home and kept saving people just without the uniform. What kind of help? Wallace asked, settling into his recliner. Marcus told him everything. Dorothy, the bracelet, Garrett and his crew, the police protecting them, the system failing the people it was supposed to serve. Wallace listened without interrupting the way good corpsmen learned to listen. When Marcus finished, Wallace was quiet for a long moment. You want to go to war with the Brennan family. I want justice for my mother. Justice and war look pretty similar from certain angles. Wallace sipped his coffee. What do you need from me? Information, evidence. You still have contacts at the hospital. Right, Mrs. Kowalski, the woman Garrett's crew pushed. She broke her wrist. There'd be medical records. HIPAA violations. I'm not asking you to break the law. I'm asking you to talk to her. See if she'll go on record about what happened. Wallace nodded slowly. What else? Marcus pulled out a small device from his pocket, a digital voice recorder, the kind journalists used. I need you to help me document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every piece of evidence. We build a case so tight that even corrupt cops can't ignore it. And if they ignore it anyway, we go over their heads. State police, FBI if we have to. Wallace set down his coffee mug. You know this could get ugly. The Brennans have money and power. They won't just roll over. I know. And you're willing to risk your patch. You're standing with the angels. Marcus met his old friend's eyes. Some things are more important than a patch. Wallace studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Semper Fi, brother, I'm in. The second recruit was harder. Officer Rebecca Morrison worked out of the county sheriff's department, one of 3 deputies who actually gave a damn about serving and protecting instead of collecting a paycheck and abusing power. She was 41, built compact and strong with the careful eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust easy answers. Marcus caught her at the end of her shift in the parking lot of the station. She saw him coming, and her hand drifted toward her service weapon. Habit. Mr. Blackwood, she said carefully, you need something. 5 minutes of your time. Off the record. If this is about yesterday's incident at Magnolia's, it is, but I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to ask for help. Rebecca glanced around the parking lot. No one else was nearby, but she lowered her voice anyway. I can't help you, Marcus. Kyle Brennan is my superior officer. Anything you tell me goes through him, even if it's about his brother committing crimes. Especially then, she looked pained. You think I don't know what Garrett is doing? I've taken 3 complaints about him and his crew in the past month. Every single one got buried. Lost paperwork. Insufficient evidence. Victims who suddenly didn't want to press charges anymore. Intimidation. Can't prove it. And even if I could, who am I going to report it to the sheriff? He plays golf with Lionel Brennan twice a week. Marcus pulled out the flash drive Maggie had given him. Security footage. Garrett knocking my mother's dinner on the floor. Stealing her bracelet. Throwing it away. Clear video. Time-stamped. Multiple witnesses. Rebecca stared at the flash drive but didn't take it. That's assault and theft. But Kyle will say the video is inconclusive, that it doesn't show intent. He'll protect his brother. What if I get more evidence, testimony from other victims, medical records, a pattern of behavior? Then I'd say you're building a good case. But you'd need to take it to state police. County level is compromised. You know anyone at state level who'd listen? Rebecca hesitated. This was the line. Cross it, and she was actively working against her own department. Don't cross it, and she was complicit in the corruption. Catherine Malone, she finally said, state investigator based in Carson City. She's been looking into Lionel Brennan's business dealings, money laundering, possible connections to organized crime. If you can tie Garrett's activities to Lionel's larger operations, she might be interested. Marcus memorized the name. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Malone's tough and she's honest, but she needs solid evidence. Speculation and witness testimony aren't enough. You'd need documentation, financial records, communications, the kind of stuff that could put someone in federal prison. I'll get it. Rebecca finally looked at him directly. My dad was a Marine, served in Desert Storm, same as you. He taught me that honor means doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. She took the flash drive. I'll make sure this gets to the right people. Off the books, but Marcus, be careful. The Brennans don't fight fair, and they have resources you don't. I have something they don't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. The third member of his alliance surprised him. Evelyn Kowalski answered her door with her right arm in a cast, her 80 years sitting heavy on shoulders that had once been strong. She looked at Marcus with suspicion that melted into recognition. You're Dorothy's boy, she said. I heard about what happened at Maggie's. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask about your wrist. Evelyn's jaw tightened. I fell. That's what I told the police. Mrs. Kowalski, I fell, she repeated more firmly, but her eyes told a different story. Fear and shame and anger all mixed together. Marcus softened his voice. My mother is afraid to go to her favorite restaurant because of Garrett Brennan and his friends. She dropped her grandmother's bracelet and they took it from her. Threw it away like trash, and she's too scared to even ask for it back. Something in Evelyn's face cracked. They pushed me, she whispered. I wasn't going to say anything, but they pushed me. I fell and broke my wrist, and they just laughed, filmed it on their phones. When I tried to get up, one of them said, Stay down, old lady. It's where you belong. Will you testify to that? To who Kyle Brennan, the sheriff who's in Lionel's pocket, to a state investigator, someone who can actually do something about it. Evelyn looked at her cast, at the signature there written by her granddaughter. Get well soon, Grandma. We love you. I'm 80 years old, she said quietly. My husband died in the Gulf War. I raised 2 kids alone. Worked as a nurse for 40 years. I'm not afraid of much anymore. She looked up at Marcus. But I am afraid of them because they're protected, because the system doesn't care about people like us. Then we change the system. How? By standing together. You, me, my mother, everyone they've hurt. We tell our stories. We gather evidence. We make so much noise they can't ignore us. Evelyn was quiet for a long time, then she nodded. What do you need? Over the next 3 days, Marcus built his case like a military operation. Reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, strategic planning. Wallace talked to 7 different people Garrett's crew had harassed. 2 were willing to testify. 3 gave statements off the record. The stories were consistent: escalating cruelty, filmed harassment, physical intimidation, all protected by Kyle's badge and Lionel's money. Rebecca Morrison quietly passed information to Catherine Malone. The state investigator was interested, very interested. Lionel Brennan had been on her radar for months. Money moving through shell companies, real estate deals that didn't add up, connections to known criminal enterprises. And Marcus discovered something that changed everything. Frank Donovan ran a small auto repair shop 2 doors down from Magnolia's Diner. 73 years old, former Army mechanic still turning wrenches because retirement was boring and he liked fixing things. Garrett's crew had vandalized his shop 3 times in the past month, slashed tires on customer cars, spray-painted obscenities on the walls, broken windows. Why didn't you report it? Marcus asked, standing in the shop amid the damage. Frank gestured around. To who Kyle Brennan I tried. He said it was probably teenagers. Random vandalism. Said there was nothing he could do without evidence. You have security cameras. Had security cameras. They smashed them first thing. Marcus looked around the shop. Tools older than Garrett Brennan. Equipment maintained with the kind of care that came from respecting your craft. A lifetime of honest work being destroyed by boys who'd never built anything. But I got smart after the first time, Frank said. He led Marcus to a back corner where a nearly invisible camera was mounted in the rafters. They don't know about this one. The footage was damning. Garrett and 3 others' faces clearly visible throwing rocks through windows, spray painting the walls, laughing, always laughing. Why, Marcus asked. Why target you specifically? Frank pulled out a letter from his desk drawer, official county stationery, an offer to buy his property at below market value, signed by Lionel Brennan. He wants this whole block, Frank said. Wants to tear it all down and build some resort, casino and hotel. Says it'll bring jobs and prosperity, but really it'll just bring more people like him, more corruption, more money for people who already have too much. Marcus held the letter, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just about cruel boys. It was about systematic intimidation. Lionel Brennan using his son to terrorize people off their property. Using Kyle to make sure there were no consequences. Real estate development as warfare. And the casualties were people like Frank and Evelyn and his mother. I need copies of everything, Marcus said. The footage, the letters, all of it. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop them. That night, Marcus met with Catherine Malone at a truck stop 40 miles outside of town. She was 38, sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone who'd learned to trust evidence over charm. She watched the security footage on Marcus's laptop without speaking. Watched Garrett assault Dorothy. Watched the vandalism at Frank's shop. Reviewed the medical reports Wallace had gathered. Read the statements from victims. When it was done, she sat back and exhaled slowly. This is good, she said, but it's not enough. What do you mean it's not enough? That's assault, theft, vandalism, witness intimidation. All misdemeanors. Garrett does 6 months at most. Probably gets probation. Lionel isn't even directly implicated. His lawyers will say his son acted independently. No connection to the real estate dealings. Marcus felt frustration rising. So what do we need? We need to connect Garrett's harassment campaign directly to Lionel's business interests. Prove conspiracy. Prove organized criminal activity. Then we can bring RICO charges. Hit them where it hurts. How do we do that? Catherine leaned forward. Someone inside the Brennan organization would need to flip. Give us communications, financial records, evidence of coordination between Lionel and Garrett. Without that, we've got a juvenile delinquent and a bunch of circumstantial evidence. Marcus thought about this. Someone inside. Someone who could prove the connection. The answer came to him 2 days later in the form of a surprise visitor. Marcus was in his garage when the knock came. He opened the door to find a young man standing there, 22 years old with the haunted look of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Trent Callahan. I was one of the guys at the diner with Garrett. Marcus's hand tightened on the doorframe. Why are you here? Because I can't do this anymore, Trent said. His voice was shaking. I didn't want to be part of it. I owe Garrett money, gambling debts. He said if I helped him with this stuff, he'd forgive what I owed. But it's gotten out of control. Your mother, Mrs. Kowalski, all those people, they didn't deserve that. You participated. I know, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but I want to make it right. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. Marcus studied the young man looking for the lie, the trick, but all he saw was genuine regret. Everything, Marcus asked. Lionel's been planning this for months. He needs that block of Route 66 for his resort. But the owners won't sell, so he came up with a plan. Have Garrett and his crew harass them. Make the area seem dangerous. Then Lionel can claim the properties are causing blight. Get the city council to use eminent domain to seize them for public good. He gets the land cheap, builds his resort, makes millions. Can you prove that? I recorded conversations. Garrett bragging about it. Lionel giving instructions. I have text messages, emails, everything. Marcus felt something shift. This was it, the evidence Catherine needed. Why should I trust you? Trent met his eyes. Because my grandmother was like your mother. She died last year. Alzheimer's. And toward the end, she was so scared all the time. Confused, helpless. And I promised myself I'd never let anyone hurt people like her. But that's exactly what I've been doing. So I'm done. I'm out. And I'm trying to do the one right thing I can do. Marcus made a decision. Come inside. They spent 3 hours going through Trent's evidence. Recordings of Garrett and Lionel discussing the harassment campaign. Text messages coordinating which properties to target. Financial records showing Lionel's resort plans required the entire block. It was everything Catherine Malone needed. Marcus called her immediately. She arrived the next morning with a federal prosecutor. They listened to Trent's testimony, reviewed the evidence, cross-referenced it with their own investigation into Lionel's money laundering. This is substantial, Catherine finally said. We can bring charges, multiple felonies, Lionel Garrett, possibly Kyle for obstruction of justice. We're talking years in federal prison. When? Marcus asked. We need a few days to get warrants. Coordinate with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. There's a cartel connection we've been tracking. Lionel's been laundering money for them through construction projects. Your evidence ties it all together. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. But hope was a dangerous thing. That night, Marcus returned to his garage to find it on fire. Not a huge fire. Not yet. But flames licking up the sidewall, eating through wood and memory. Someone had thrown a Molotov cocktail through the window. He grabbed the extinguisher from his truck and fought the fire choking on smoke eyes burning. By the time he got it under control, half the garage was destroyed, including his workbench, including the photos of him and Dorothy, including the box with his challenge coin, and including something else, something he kept hidden for years. In the back corner behind a false panel, there had been a small wooden box. Inside it, a photograph of a little girl, 8 years old, blonde hair, his daughter's smile. Sarah Blackwood, dead 12 years, killed in a car accident while Marcus was deployed in Afghanistan. He'd been in Helmand province when he got the call. Couldn't get home in time for the funeral. Hadn't been there when she needed him most. The photograph was ash now, just like everything else. On the ground outside, he found a note, typed, untraceable. Back off or next time it's your mother's house. Marcus stood in the ruins of his garage, the note trembling in his hand, and felt something inside him break. Not his resolve, something deeper. The last barrier between the man he was trying to be and the man the war had made him. They'd threatened his mother. Everything that came next was their fault. He pulled out his phone, made the call he'd been avoiding. Clayton, it's Marcus. They burned my garage, threatened my mother. I'm done playing by their rules. Marcus, I need to know, if I do what needs to be done, if I handle this the way it should be handled, are you with me or against me? A long silence. What exactly are you planning? I'm planning to protect my family by any means necessary. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. Another pause, then Clayton's voice rough but certain. The patch is just leather and thread, brother. What matters is what it represents. And you've represented it better than most of us ever will. Do what you need to do. We'll deal with the consequences after. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Semper Fi. Semper Fi. He hung up and looked at the burned garage, at the photograph that was gone forever, at the note threatening the only family he had left. The desert night was cold. The stars were sharp and bright and indifferent. Marcus Blackwood made his decision. Tomorrow the war would come home, and he would be ready. The fire came 3 nights after Marcus met with Catherine Malone. Not to his garage this time, to Magnolia's diner. Marcus got the call at 2 in the morning. Wallace's voice tight with urgency. Mark, you need to get down here now. By the time Marcus arrived, the fire department had it mostly contained, but the damage was done. The back half of the diner was gutted. Black smoke poured from shattered windows. The neon sign that had flickered since 1987 was dark. Dead. And on a stretcher being loaded into an ambulance, Maggie O'Brien. Burns on her arms and face. She'd been sleeping in the back office, working late on bookkeeping when the Molotov cocktails came through the windows. Marcus stood in the parking lot, still warm from the flames, and felt the last of his restraint crumble. Second-degree burns, Wallace said quietly. He'd arrived with the ambulance, still wore his paramedic uniform. She'll survive. But Marcus, this wasn't random. Someone wanted to send a message. They found the note an hour later, typed and taped to Marcus's truck windshield. Last warning. Back off or next time people die. Marcus held the paper in shaking hands. Around him, firefighters packed up equipment. Deputies took statements. Kyle Brennan was conspicuously absent. So was his brother Garrett, but someone else wasn't. A black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Expensive. Out of place. Lionel Brennan stepped out, and for the first time since Marcus had known of him, the man looked old, scared. Mr. Blackwood, Lionel said. His voice was hoarse. I need to talk to you. Marcus's hand curled into a fist. This man who'd orchestrated everything, who turned his son into a weapon, who terrorized Marcus's mother. You need to leave, Marcus said quietly. Before I do something we'll both regret. Please, Lionel stepped closer. Marcus saw the desperation in his eyes. Real fear. I know you hate me. You should, but I'm not your enemy right now. We have a bigger problem. We don't have anything. The cartel burned your diner. Not me, not my boys. The Sinaloa faction I have been working with. They're done waiting. They gave me 48 hours to deliver $2 million or the land for the resort. Lionel's voice cracked. I don't have the money. I can't get the land. And they just sent me photos of Garrett in his car with a rifle scope crosshair on his head. Marcus stared at him. Your problem, not mine. They won't stop with Garrett. They'll kill Kyle, my ex-wife, anyone connected to this deal. And then Lionel pulled out his phone, showed Marcus a text message. They'll finish what they started here. Everyone who owns property on this block. Your mother, Frank Donovan, Mrs. Kowalski, They'll burn them out or kill them, whatever it takes to clear the land. Marcus read the message. Explicit, detailed. Professional killers describing exactly how they'd make it look like accidents. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm a coward, Lionel said simply. Because I thought I could play in the big leagues and I can't. Because my son is going to die for my mistakes. And because God help me, you're the only person I know who might be crazy enough to stand up to them. Marcus looked at the smoking ruin of Maggie's diner, at the ambulance lights fading in the distance, at this broken man who caused so much pain now begging for help. Every instinct said to walk away. Let Lionel face the consequences of his choices. Let the cartel clean up its own mess. But then Marcus thought about Garrett's smug face in the diner, the phone recording Dorothy's fear, the bracelet in the trash, and he thought about James Morrison, the specialist he'd abandoned in Iraq in 1991, the one who'd helped them, the one he'd left behind because it wasn't his mission. He'd carried that weight for 35 years, the knowledge that following orders, doing the smart thing, had gotten an innocent person killed. Where's Garrett now? Marcus asked. Safe house, FBI protection. Catherine Malone got him into federal custody after the car fire. The car fire. 2 nights ago, someone torched Garrett's BMW while he was inside. He got out with second-degree burns on his arms. That's when I knew this was real. They're really going to kill us all. Marcus pulled out his phone, called Catherine Malone. She answered on the second ring voice alert despite the hour. Marcus, I heard about Maggie's. I'm sorry. Lionel Brennan is standing in front of me. Says the cartel gave him 48 hours. Says they're targeting everyone on this block. A pause. He's not wrong. We intercepted communications. The Sinaloa cell operating here got orders from Mexico. Liquidate the Brennan situation, recover assets, or eliminate obstacles. We're bringing Lionel and Garrett into federal custody, but you can't protect everyone. We have limited resources. We can put agents on the primary targets, but Marcus, there are 17 property owners on that block. We can't cover them all, and these are professional killers. If they want someone dead, Marcus looked at Lionel, at the fear in the man's eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for his sons. What if we consolidated the targets, Marcus said, put everyone in one place, easier to defend. Where? Marcus looked at the burned diner, at the photographs still visible through the smoke-stained windows. Generations of veterans who'd stood their ground when it mattered. Here, what's left of Magnolias. It's where this started. Might as well be where it ends. 12 hours later, Marcus had assembled his people. Dorothy sat in the one undamaged booth, hands wrapped around coffee that Maggie had somehow managed to brew on a camping stove. His mother's face was pale but determined. I'm not running, she'd said when Marcus called. Not anymore. Those boys tried to make me afraid. They succeeded for a while, but I'm done being afraid. Frank Donovan and Evelyn Kowalski sat together, overnight bags at their feet. 2 other elderly property owners Marcus had contacted, all of them choosing to stand rather than hide. Wallace Patterson was setting up a makeshift medical station. Trauma supplies, burn kits, IV bags, the old corpsman preparing for the worst. Trent Callahan sat in the corner looking like he wanted to disappear, but he'd come when Marcus called. I need to be here, he'd said. I helped create this mess. I helped clean it up. And at the door, 6 Hells Angels. Clayton Murphy had arrived at dawn with 5 chapter members. Big men with hard faces and the kind of loyalty that didn't need explanation. Marcus had tried to refuse. Clayton, I'm on probation. You can't. Shut up, Marcus. Clayton's voice was gentle. You think we're here because of club rules. We're here because you're our brother. Because what you're doing matters. Because sometimes the patch means more than the rules. Now they stood guard, watching the street waiting. Catherine Malone arrived at noon with FBI Special Agent David Warren and 4 state police officers. She looked at Marcus's makeshift fortress and shook her head. This is insane. You know that, right? Probably. We should evacuate everyone, put them in protective custody until we round up the cartel cell. How long will that take? Catherine didn't answer. They both knew it could be weeks, months, and the people in this diner couldn't put their lives on hold that long, couldn't abandon their homes, their businesses, everything they'd built. We're staying, Marcus said, but we could use backup. Warren pulled out a tactical radio. We've got a rapid response team 15 minutes out. SWAT on standby. If shooting starts, we can flood this area with law enforcement in under 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a long time. I know, which is why I'm leaving these 4 troopers here with you and why you need to be very, very careful. Marcus looked around the diner, at his mother, at the elderly veterans who'd chosen to trust him, at the angels who'd risked their patches to stand with him. Careful wasn't really an option anymore. The next 8 hours passed in tense waiting. The sun tracked across the sky. Customers who didn't know about the situation tried to enter and were turned away by state police. The streets slowly emptied. Marcus sat with Dorothy as afternoon bled into evening. You didn't have to stay, Ma. You could have gone somewhere safe. Dorothy took his hand. Her fingers were thin, fragile. When had she gotten so old? Baby, I raised you by myself after your daddy died. Worked 2 jobs, kept food on the table, kept you in school. You think I did all that just to run away when things got hard? This is different. These are killers. And you're my son, a United States Marine, a man who's never walked away from a fight that mattered. She squeezed his hand. I'm not walking away either. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I'm scared, Ma. Scared I'm going to get you killed. I know, sweetheart. But you know what scares me more, living the rest of my life, afraid to go to my favorite restaurant, afraid to stand up for what's right. That's not living. That's just existing. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have something we want. Trent Callahan, send him out. Everyone else lives. Marcus showed it to Catherine. She was on her radio immediately calling for backup. Alert status. But Marcus was already walking to where Trent sat. The young man looked up, saw Marcus's face, and understood. They want me, Trent said. Not a question. Yeah. Trent stood. Okay. Sit down. Mr. Blackwood, I said sit down. Marcus's voice carried the weight of 22 years giving orders. Trent sat. You made mistakes. You hurt people. But you're trying to make it right. That counts for something. Not enough to die for. Maybe not. But you're not dying today. None of us are. Outside, the sun touched the horizon. The light turned the same burnt orange as 3 days ago when this all began. When Marcus had arrived to find his mother terrified and her dinner on the ground. Full circle. Clayton appeared at Marcus's shoulder. Movement, 3 vehicles, black SUVs, stopped 2 blocks out. Marcus looked at Catherine. She nodded grimly. That's them. How many? Thermal imaging shows 12 heat signatures. Professional loadout, military-grade weapons. Marcus did the math. 12 cartel soldiers against 6 angels, 4 state troopers, and a handful of elderly civilians. The numbers weren't good, but numbers had never been the point. Everyone to the back room, Marcus said. Dorothy, Evelyn, Frank, the others. Wallace, you stay with them. Clayton, your guys take positions covering the front and sides. Troopers, you're with them. Catherine grabbed his arm. Marcus, what are you doing? Giving them what they want. You're not seriously by, not Trent, me. I'm the one who started this. Who got federal investigators involved? Who has all the evidence? I'm what they really need to eliminate. That's suicide. That's buying time for your backup to arrive. You said 20 minutes. I'll give you 30. Before Catherine could stop him, Marcus walked to the front door, opened it, stepped out into the parking lot with his hands visible. The October air was cool, the same air he'd breathed that first night. Everything the same, everything different. A voice called out from behind the SUVs, accented English, professional. Marcus Blackwood, we don't want trouble with you. Send out Trent Callahan. This ends peacefully. Can't do that, Marcus called back. Then you die. Everyone inside dies. Is that worth it for a punk kid who helped terrorize your mother? Marcus thought about that, about Trent's haunted eyes, about redemption and second chances, about James Morrison who'd never gotten one. Yeah, Marcus said, it's worth it, because that's what honor means. You protect the weak even when they don't deserve it, especially then. Silence, then movement. 12 men emerged from behind the vehicles. Body armor, automatic weapons, night vision goggles hanging ready. These weren't street thugs. These were soldiers. The leader stepped forward, 40-something, scar across his left cheek. Eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by more. You're brave. Stupid but brave. Last chance. The boy or everyone. Marcus was about to answer when the diner door opened behind him. Garrett Brennan stepped out. Wait, Garrett said. His arms were bandaged from the car fire. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. You want someone to blame me. This whole thing, it was my idea. Harassing those people, filming them. I thought it was funny, thought it made me important. The cartel leader looked at Garrett with mild interest. You're Lionel Brennan's son. Yeah. Your father owes us $2 million. You got $2 million. No, but I've got something else. Information, account numbers. Names of everyone my father worked with. Shell companies, money routes, everything you need to recover your investment from his other operations. Garrett pulled a USB drive from his pocket. It's all here. You kill me, you get nothing. You take this, you get your money back. Maybe even make a profit. The leader smiled. Smart boy. Should have been smart earlier. He raised his weapon. That's when everything exploded into chaos. Not from the cartel, from inside the diner. Clayton and the Angels. State troopers. All of them firing at once. Not at the cartel soldiers. At their vehicles. Shooting out tires, engines, anything to immobilize them. Marcus grabbed Garrett and ran back toward the diner. Bullets chased them, chewing up asphalt. Marcus felt something tug at his vest. Close. Too close. They made it through the door. Angels pulled them inside. Returned fire from the diner now. Controlled bursts, keeping the cartel pinned. What the hell was that? Marcus shouted at Garrett. Making amends. Garrett gasped. You said everyone deserves a second chance. I'm taking mine. Outside the cartel, soldiers spread out, taking cover. Professional, disciplined. This wasn't going to be a quick fight. Catherine was on the radio. Shots fired, shots fired. Need immediate backup at Magnolia's diner. Dispatch response. SWAT inbound. ETA 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Marcus looked around the diner, at Dorothy crouched in the back room, at Wallace ready with medical supplies, at Clayton and the Angels holding the line. 18 minutes might as well be 18 hours. The shooting intensified. The cartel had them outgunned and they knew it. Systematic fire, probing for weaknesses, trying to flank, then more vehicles. Marcus's heart sank. Reinforcements. They were finished. But the new arrivals weren't cartel. Black SUVs, different make. FBI logos. Agents poured out body armor and assault rifles taking positions. And behind them, local sheriff's department vehicles. Real deputies, not Kyle's corrupt friends, the ones who actually believed in serving and protecting. The cartel found themselves surrounded, caught between the diner and federal law enforcement. The leader realized it too. His voice carried across the parking lot. Fall back, fall back. They tried to run. Most made it to the tree line, but 3 went down hit by FBI fire. 2 surrendered immediately. One, the leader with the scarred face, fought to the last. He went down hard, final, and then it was over. The sudden silence was deafening. Marcus's ears rang. His hands shook with adrenaline dump. Around him, Angels lowered their weapons. State troopers exhaled. Dorothy appeared from the back room, eyes wide, but alive. Alive. Catherine approached Marcus as federal agents secured the scene. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. You said that already. Bears repeating. She looked at Garrett, who sat against the wall, bandaged arms wrapped around his knees. What he did, that took guts. Yeah. The USB drive he offered. That real? I have no idea. Probably bluffing. Catherine smiled. Good bluff. She turned serious. Lionel's in custody, giving full cooperation. Names, accounts, everything. Kyle tried to run. We got him at the state line. And with what happened here, the cartel's Nevada operation is finished. Marcus felt the weight of it settling. Over. It was actually over. Your mother, Catherine asked. Marcus looked at Dorothy. She was hugging Evelyn Kowalski, two old women who'd been terrorized, who'd stood their ground, who'd won. She's okay. And you? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't know yet. But then something happened that changed everything. Rebecca Morrison walked through the door, still in her deputy uniform, face pale, determined. She walked straight to Marcus, stopped 3 feet away. I need to tell you something, she said. Something I should have told you when we first met. Marcus looked at her, at the careful eyes, at something familiar he'd never been able to place. James Morrison, Rebecca said quietly. Specialist, 1st Marine Division, Desert Storm, 1991. You knew him. Marcus's blood went cold. How do you... He was my father. The world tilted. Marcus's vision narrowed. James Morrison, the kid from Montana, the one he'd left behind, the one who'd died because Marcus had followed orders instead of his conscience. I don't understand. He had a wife back home. My mother, she was pregnant when he deployed. I was born 6 months before he died. Rebecca's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I grew up knowing my father was a hero, that he died serving his country. But when I joined the force, I wanted to know more. I filed Freedom of Information requests, got his service records, found the after-action reports. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. Marcus recognized it, his own report from February 1991. You wrote about him, Rebecca said, how he'd helped your squad, how you'd wanted to bring him with you, but orders were orders, how you'd felt. Her voice cracked. How you'd felt when they found his body. Marcus couldn't breathe. Rebecca, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I came here to hate you, Rebecca cut him off. 6 months ago, I requested transfer to this county specifically because I knew you lived here. I was going to make your life hell, make you pay for abandoning my father. You should have. But then I watched you, saw how you protected your mother, how you stood up for people who couldn't protect themselves, how you risked everything, your patch, your freedom, your life, because it was the right thing to do. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and I realized something. My father chose to help you. He could have hidden, could have surrendered to the Iraqis, but he helped because that's who he was, just like you're helping these people because of who you are. Marcus's throat was so tight he could barely speak. He deserved better. He did, but you were 22 years old following orders in a war zone. You were trying to survive, and you've carried that guilt for 35 years. Rebecca stepped closer. My father wouldn't want that. He'd want you to forgive yourself, and if he can't tell you that, then I will. She held out her hand. Marcus stared at it, at this woman who had every right to hate him, who'd chosen forgiveness instead. He took her hand. Rebecca pulled him into a hug. Marcus broke. 35 years of guilt and shame and nightmares crashing down at once. He sobbed into her shoulder while Dorothy watched tears streaming down her own face. I'm sorry, Marcus kept saying. I'm so sorry. I know, Rebecca whispered. I know, it's okay. It's okay now. When Marcus finally pulled away, Wallace was there with water. Clayton had a hand on his shoulder. His mother was crying openly. There's something else. Rebecca said, wiping her eyes. I did a DNA test. Got your profile from that coffee cup you left at the station last week. Marcus looked at her in confusion. My mother remarried when I was 2. Good man. Raised me as his own. I took his name. Morrison isn't my birth name. She took a breath. My biological mother, the woman my father married before Desert Storm, her name was Jennifer Blackwood. The world stopped. Blackwood, Marcus repeated. Your father had a brother, Michael. He died in a car accident in 1989. His widow was Jennifer. She married my father 6 months later, right before he deployed. When he died, she was devastated, gave me up for adoption. Couldn't handle raising a baby alone with her grief. Marcus's mind raced. Michael Blackwood, his father's younger brother, who died in Marcus's senior year of high school, who'd been married to Jennifer. You're saying, I'm your cousin, Rebecca said, by blood, and my father married into your family, which makes you, She smiled through tears. The uncle I never knew I had. Marcus couldn't process it, couldn't breathe. This woman he had been terrified of, who'd had every reason to destroy him, was family. Dorothy was suddenly there, pulling Rebecca into a hug. Oh my God, sweetheart. Family, your family. And just like that, in the ruins of a burned diner surrounded by the aftermath of a gunfight, Marcus Blackwood found something he had lost 35 years ago. Not just forgiveness, redemption. The next 6 hours were a blur. FBI processing the scene, paramedics checking everyone for injuries, Catherine Malone coordinating arrests across 3 counties. Lionel Brennan was taken into federal custody. Kyle Brennan was already in a holding cell. Garrett was hospitalized under guard, facing years of charges, but credited with cooperation that had saved lives. The surviving cartel members were transferred to a federal facility. The dead were bagged and photographed and cataloged. And through it all, Marcus sat with Dorothy and Rebecca drinking terrible coffee and trying to understand how his life had changed so completely in the span of a single day. What happens now? Dorothy asked as dawn broke over the desert. Marcus looked at the burned diner, at the people gathered in the parking lot, veterans and civilians, angels and law enforcement, people who'd been strangers a week ago and were brothers now. Now we rebuild, he said, the diner, the community, everything they tried to destroy. And the bracelet, Dorothy asked quietly. Marcus had almost forgotten. The whole reason this started, his mother's silver bracelet, lost in the chaos of everything that had happened. I'll find it, he promised. I don't care how long it takes. I'll find it. Rebecca squeezed his hand. We'll find it, together. As the sun rose, fully painting the Nevada sky in shades of gold and pink, Marcus Blackwood looked at his mother and his newfound cousin and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, honest, uncomplicated hope. The war wasn't over. There would be trials, testimony, consequences for everyone involved. But for the first time since that February day in 1991, when he'd watched James Morrison's face crumble with disbelief, Marcus felt like maybe he could forgive himself. Maybe he could move forward. Maybe he could be the man his daughter would have been proud of. The man his mother had always believed he was. The road ahead was still long, still uncertain, but he wouldn't walk it alone anymore. And that made all the difference. The morning after the gunfight, Marcus returned to the diner alone. The sun was barely up, the desert air still cool and clean. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze. The parking lot was empty except for a single state trooper keeping watch who nodded at Marcus and looked the other way. Some things you had to do by yourself. Marcus stood in the middle of the burned-out dining room and looked at the devastation. Half the ceiling had collapsed. The booths where his mother had sat were charred skeletons. The photographs on the walls, all those generations of veterans, were smoke damaged, some destroyed completely. But the building still stood, broken but standing. He started in the corner where it had all happened, where Garrett had shoved Dorothy's plate off the table, where the bracelet had fallen. The trash can was tipped over its contents, spilled across the floor during the chaos. Coffee grounds, napkins, broken glass. Marcus knelt and began searching through the debris. His hands were steady now, purposeful. He worked methodically, moving from the trash pile to the area under the booth, then to the scorched floorboards near the kitchen. An hour passed, then two. Nothing. Marcus sat back on his heels, frustration building. It had to be here. Unless the fire had melted it, unless someone had swept it up without knowing, unless, wait, there, caught beneath a piece of burned wood near the back wall, something silver. Marcus's heart stuttered. He moved the wood carefully, afraid of what he might find, afraid it would be destroyed, afraid it would be gone forever like everything else. But there it was, the bracelet. The silver was tarnished black in places from the smoke and heat. One of the links was bent, twisted from the weight of the debris, but the engraving was still clear. 3 names, 3 generations, 3 women who'd learned to be strong because the alternative was breaking. Eleanor Hartley, 1920 to 2004. Margaret Hartley Blackwood, 1945 to 2008. Dorothy Ann Blackwood, 1947 to the present. Marcus picked it up carefully, held it in his palm. It was warm from the morning sun coming through the broken windows. He sat on the floor of the burned diner holding his great-grandmother's bracelet and felt something break loose in his chest. Not pain, release. He'd kept his promise. He'd protected his mother. He'd stood his ground, and he'd recovered what was taken. But there was something else. As he turned the bracelet over in his hands, cleaning away the soot, he noticed something he'd never seen before. On the inside of the band, almost invisible even when clean, were tiny markings. Coordinates. Marcus squinted at them. Numbers etched so small they were barely visible. GPS coordinates, he realized. Someone had engraved them there. Recently, judging by the sharpness of the marks compared to the names. His mother. It had to be his mother. But why would Dorothy hide coordinates inside her most precious possession? Marcus pulled out his phone, entered the numbers into his GPS. The location loaded. First National Bank of Nevada, Carson City, 40 miles away. Marcus stood up, the bracelet clutched in his fist, and felt the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. His mother had known something, had prepared for something, had known she might not always be there to tell him herself. He drove to Dorothy's house first. She answered the door in her bathrobe, coffee cup in hand, looking more tired than he'd ever seen her. Marcus, it's 7 in the morning. I know, Ma, but I found something. He held out his hand. The bracelet caught the light. Dorothy's breath caught. She set down her coffee with shaking hands and took the bracelet, held it up to examine it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You found it. After everything, you actually found it. I promised I would. Marcus paused. But Ma, there's something on it. Coordinates inside the band. Did you put them there? Dorothy's expression shifted. Something Marcus couldn't read. Not quite guilt, not quite relief. Yes, she said quietly. 6 months ago, I was going to tell you, but I wanted to wait until... Her voice broke. Until the right time. Tell me what... Dorothy gestured him inside, sat him down at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd helped him with homework 40 years ago. Where they'd shared 1,000 meals. Where she'd sat alone waiting for him to come home from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from all the wars that never really ended. I'm sick, baby, she said simply. The world tilted. What? Cancer. Stage 2. Ovarian. They caught it early. The prognosis is good with treatment. But I'm 79 years old, Marcus. My body's tired. She took his hand. I've been doing chemo. That's why I've been so pale, so weak. Why those boys scared me so badly. I wasn't just afraid of them. I was afraid I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Marcus felt like he'd been punched. Why didn't you tell me? Because you've carried enough, sweetheart. You carried your father's death. You carried Sarah's death. And you carried Iraq and Afghanistan. into every nightmare that followed you home. I didn't want to add to that burden. Ma, listen to me. Dorothy's voice was firm now, the voice of the woman who'd raised him alone, who'd survived everything life threw at her. I'm not dying tomorrow. The doctors say I have years if the treatment works. But I wanted to be prepared, wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, you'd know what to do. The coordinates. Yes, they lead to a safe deposit box at First National. I opened it last year, put some things aside. She smiled. Money, not a fortune, but enough. $50,000, my life savings. I want you to have it, to use it for something that matters. Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. There's also a letter, Dorothy continued. Instructions, wishes, things I needed to say while I still could. She cupped his face with her weathered hands. But the most important thing is already written on that bracelet. Your great-grandmother's name. Your grandmother's name. My name. We survived, Marcus. We endured. And now you're going to help other people do the same. I don't understand. The organization you've been thinking about. The one to help people like Evelyn and Frank. Veterans Against Bullying, Wallace called it. That money is seed funding. To make it real. To make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Marcus looked at his mother, frail but unbroken, sick but still fighting, and understood. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. I love you, Ma. I love you too, baby. Now take me to the bank. Let's see what secrets I left for you. The safe deposit box was small and gray and completely unremarkable. Marcus opened it with the key Dorothy provided, his hand surprisingly steady. Inside were three things: first, bundled stacks of $100 bills, $50,000 exactly. More money than Marcus had ever seen in one place. Second, legal documents. Deed to Dorothy's house, already signed over to Marcus. Insurance policies. Investment accounts he'd never known existed. Third, an envelope, cream-colored, heavy stock, his name written in his mother's careful handwriting. Marcus picked up the envelope. His hand shook now. Read it later, Dorothy said gently. When you're ready, when you need to hear my voice, and I'm not there to give it to you. Marcus nodded, couldn't speak, just held the envelope like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. 4 months later, Marcus stood in a federal courtroom and watched justice be delivered. Lionel Brennan was sentenced to 20 years for racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and accessory to attempted murder. His business empire was dismantled, his property seized, his name now synonymous with corruption. The judge had been thorough and merciless. Mr. Brennan, you used your wealth and influence to terrorize the most vulnerable members of this community. You turned your own son into a weapon. You consorted with drug cartels. You nearly got innocent people killed. The only reason you're not facing life in prison is because your cooperation helped dismantle a major criminal organization. But make no mistake, you will serve every day of this sentence. And when you get out, if you get out, you will be a pariah. That is the price of your choices. Kyle Brennan received 7 years for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and abuse of power under color of authority. His badge was stripped. His career was over. His future, a cell in a federal penitentiary. He tried to run, made it to the Arizona border before FBI caught him. The judge had not been sympathetic. Garrett Brennan's sentencing was different. He stood before the judge, bandages still visible on his arms from the car fire, and spoke clearly. Your Honor, I'm not going to make excuses. I did terrible things. I hurt people for no reason except that I could. I was cruel because cruelty made me feel powerful. But then I saw what real courage looks like. I saw Marcus Blackwood risk everything to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. I saw my victims' people I'd terrorized stand up to trained killers rather than abandon each other. And I realized I'd been living like a coward my whole life. The judge listened impassively. I offered myself as a trade to the cartel because It was the first real choice I'd ever made. Not because my father told me to, not because my brother protected me, but because it was right. And I want to keep making those choices. I want to spend the rest of my life making amends. The judge considered, Mr. Brennan, your cooperation was substantial. You provided evidence that led to the arrest of 17 cartel members. You put yourself in harm's way to protect innocent people. The prosecutors have recommended leniency. Garrett nodded. However, the judge continued, you terrorized elderly citizens. You destroyed property. You were the catalyst for violence that nearly killed multiple people. I cannot ignore that. She paused. 18 months in federal prison, 5 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, specifically working with veterans organizations. You will submit to regular counseling. You will make financial restitution to every person you harmed. And Mr. Brennan, if you appear before me again for any reason, I will show you no mercy. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. As Garrett was led away, he caught Marcus's eye, nodded. Marcus nodded back. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a daily choice, and Garrett was finally learning to make it. The cartel soldiers who survived received sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years. Federal prosecutors had been vicious. Catherine Malone had been thorough. And the message was clear: Nevada was not friendly territory for organized crime. When it was over, Marcus walked out of the courthouse with Dorothy on one arm and Rebecca on the other. Wallace and Clayton waited outside, along with Evelyn Frank and a dozen others whose lives had been changed by what happened at Magnolia's diner. It's really over, Dorothy said quietly. Yeah, Ma, it's really over. So what now? Marcus smiled. Now we build something. Veterans Against Bullying officially opened 6 weeks later. The office was small, a converted storefront on Route 66-3, doors down from where Magnolia's diner was being rebuilt. But it was theirs. Marcus had used Dorothy's $50,000 to set up the nonprofit, hired a lawyer to handle the paperwork, brought in Wallace as medical director, Rebecca as legal liaison. Even got Clayton to serve on the board of Hell's Angel, helping run a community organization raised eyebrows, but the man's commitment to protecting the vulnerable was unquestionable. Their mission was simple: help seniors and other vulnerable people fight harassment, intimidation, and abuse. Provide them with legal resources, security consultations, and most importantly, a community that had their backs. The first case came within a week. An elderly woman named Patricia Evans being harassed by her landlord, who wanted to force her out so he could sell the building. Marcus took the case personally. Wallace documented the harassment. Rebecca connected them with housing advocates, and within a month the landlord backed down, signed a settlement, and Patricia kept her home. Word spread. More cases came. A veteran being scammed by a contractor, a widow being pressured to sell her late husband's business, an elderly couple targeted by identity thieves. Veterans Against Bullying helped them all. And the first volunteer to walk through their door fresh out of federal prison after serving 18 months was Garrett Brennan. I need to make this right, Garrett said simply. However long it takes, whatever it costs, I need to be better than I was. Marcus studied the young man, saw genuine change, saw someone who had been given a second chance and was desperate to deserve it. Redemption's not a destination, Marcus told him. It's a daily choice. You make it every morning. Choose to be better than you were yesterday. Choose to help instead of hurt. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Then welcome to the team. And Marcus meant it. Because if Marcus Blackwood, a man who'd abandoned James Morrison in the Iraqi desert, who'd failed to be there when his daughter died, who'd nearly lost everything to PTSD and rage, could find redemption, then anyone could. Garrett proved himself quickly. He worked harder than anyone, took the worst shifts, listened to angry seniors vent about their problems with patience and genuine empathy. He visited Evelyn Kowalski weekly to check on her wrist, helped Frank Donovan rebuild his garage, even apologized personally to every person he had harassed. Some forgave him, some didn't. Garrett accepted both with grace. I can't change what I did, he told Marcus 6 months in, but I can change what I do next. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You're learning. Magnolia's Diner reopened 1 year to the day after the fire. Maggie O'Brien had insisted on the symbolism. We don't run, we don't hide, we rebuild. The new diner was beautiful. The old photographs had been professionally restored and reframed. New ones were added, including one of Dorothy and Marcus at the grand reopening, both of them smiling. Dorothy's hand was visible in the photo, the silver bracelet gleaming on her wrist. The whole town came to the celebration. Veterans and civilians, young and old. People who'd been too afraid to speak up before, but found courage in Dorothy's stand. Representatives from the governor's office attended. State legislators, even a congressman who gave a speech about ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. But the moment that mattered most came when Maggie walked to the center of the diner and raised her glass. To Dorothy Blackwood, she said, who showed us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and standing anyway. Everyone raised their glasses. To Dorothy, Marcus looked at his mother, thinner now. From the chemotherapy, her hair covered with a beautiful scarf Rebecca had bought her, but smiling wider than he'd seen in years, and felt his chest swell with pride. She'd survived. Not just the cancer, everything. And she taught an entire community how to do the same. That night, after the crowds dispersed, Marcus sat with Dorothy, Rebecca, and Wallace at a corner booth. The same booth where it had all started, where Garrett had shoved the plate off the table. You ever think about how different things could have gone? Wallace asked. Every day, Marcus said. If you'd walked away at the beginning, decided the bracelet wasn't worth the fight. I thought about it, Marcus admitted, for about 10 seconds. Dorothy squeezed his hand. But you didn't, because you're your father's son, because you're a Marine, because you're the man I raised you to be. Rebecca cleared her throat. I need to tell you all something. They looked at her. I'm putting in for a transfer, she said, to the state police. Catherine Malone offered me a position with her unit, investigating public corruption. Marcus felt a pang of loss. They'd grown close over the past year, discovered they had the same sense of humor, the same commitment to justice, the same tendency to brood over problems until solutions emerged. Family, real family. That's amazing, he said, meaning it. Catherine's lucky to have you. I'm not leaving because I want to, Rebecca said quickly. But this county needs someone at the state level. Someone who knows how the corruption works from the inside. Someone who won't let another Brennan situation happen. You'll be great, Dorothy said. Your father would be so proud. Both of them. Rebecca's eyes misted. I'm coming back for Thanksgiving, though, and Christmas, and any other time you'll have me. Always, Marcus said, your family. Actually, Rebecca pulled out an envelope. I've been working on something. Legal papers. To make it official. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside were adoption documents. Not for Rebecca, she was 41 years old, but a formal legal recognition of kinship, a way to make their family connection official in the eyes of the law. I wanted to honor my father, Rebecca said, James Morrison, but I also wanted to honor the family he married into, the Blackwoods. So I'm legally changing my name, Rebecca Morrison Blackwood, if that's okay with you. Dorothy burst into tears, happy ones. Marcus couldn't speak, just pulled Rebecca into a hug and held on. 2 years passed. Dorothy's cancer went into remission. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. She'd never be fully cured. That wasn't how ovarian cancer worked, but she was stable, healthy, strong enough to volunteer at Veterans Against Bullying 3 days a week, strong enough to see her son happy, because Marcus had found something unexpected in the wreckage of everything that had happened. Her name was Vera Ashford. She was 52, a civil rights attorney who'd worked on the prosecution team that brought down Lionel Brennan. Sharp-minded, quick-witted, with a smile that made Marcus forget how to breathe. She'd approached him after one of the court hearings. "Mr. Blackwood, I wanted to thank you. What you did standing up to the Brennans protecting your community, it reminded me why I became a lawyer." They'd talked, just coffee at first, then dinner, then long walks through the desert at sunset talking about everything and nothing. Vera understood trauma. Her father had been a civil rights worker in the 60s, beaten nearly to death in Selma. She'd grown up around survivors, knew how to give space when the nightmares came, knew when to push and when to hold. "I'm damaged goods," Marcus had warned her early on. "PTSD, trust issues, a dead daughter I still dream about, a war I can't leave behind. Good thing I specialize in impossible cases," Vera had replied. "And Marcus, you're not damaged. You're healing. There's a difference." They'd been together for a year now. Not married, neither of them was in a rush, but building something real. Something that felt like it might last. Dorothy approved. "She's good for you, baby. She makes you laugh. I haven't heard you laugh like that since before Iraq." Veterans Against Bullying had helped over 200 people in 2 years. Their model was being copied in 3 other states. National media had done stories on them. Marcus had been invited to speak at veteran conferences, community organizing summits, even testified before Congress about elder abuse. But the moment that meant the most came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. An elderly man walked into their office, 85 years old, hunched with age, wearing a faded army jacket covered in Vietnam patches. "I need help," he said simply. Marcus invited him to sit, made him coffee, listened to his story. The man's name was Henry Walsh. He lived in a nursing home. The staff were stealing from him money, medications, personal items. When he complained, they threatened to have him declared incompetent, to take away the last of his autonomy. It was evil disguised as caregiving. Marcus felt the old rage rising, the need to act, to fight, to make things right. But he was better now, more controlled. He called Garrett over. "We've got a case," Marcus said. "Nursing home abuse. Going to need documentation, witnesses, probably legal action." Garrett nodded, already taking notes. "I'll start with a welfare check. See if there are other residents being mistreated. Wallace can handle the medical side. Rebecca can coordinate with state regulators." "Good." Marcus turned back to Henry. "Mr. Walsh, I want you to know something. What's happening to you is wrong, but it's not going to continue. We're going to help you. We're going to make sure you're safe. And we're going to make sure the people who hurt you face consequences." Henry's eyes filled with fire. "Why, you don't even know me." "Because somebody did the same thing for me once," Marcus said. "And now it's my turn to pay it forward." 3 months later, the nursing home was under federal investigation. 5 staff members had been fired. 12 residents, including Henry, had been moved to better facilities. Criminal charges were pending. And Henry Walsh volunteered for Veterans Against Bullying. "I want to help others like you helped me," he said. The circle continued. Victim became survivor, became advocate. Pain became purpose. Trauma became strength. It was how healing worked. Dorothy died peacefully at 81, not from cancer, from pneumonia, quick and relatively painless. She went to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up. Marcus found her in the morning, still wearing the silver bracelet. Her face was peaceful, almost smiling. He sat beside her bed and held her hand until the paramedics arrived. Wallace was gentle, respectful. Rebecca came immediately, so did Vera. The room filled with people who'd loved Dorothy Blackwood. The funeral was huge. Over 300 people attended, veterans from 3 wars, clients from Veterans Against Bullying, community members who'd been inspired by her courage. Evelyn Kowalski spoke, her voice clear and strong despite her 82 years. "Dorothy Blackwood taught us courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and standing anyway." She was terrified that day at the diner, terrified of those boys, but she stood. And because she stood, all of us learned to stand too. Garrett spoke next, tears streaming down his face. I'm the reason Dorothy suffered. I'm the one who hurt her, and she had every reason to hate me. But when I asked for forgiveness, when I tried to make amends, she gave me a chance. She told me, every day is an opportunity to be better than you were yesterday. She saw the man I could become before I saw it myself. That's grace, that's love, that's Dorothy. Marcus spoke last, wearing his dress blues and his Hell's Angels patch. Two parts of his identity that had seemed contradictory but were really the same thing. Service, loyalty, honor. My mother was the strongest person I've ever known, he said. Not because she never broke, but because she broke and put herself back together every single time. She lost her husband young, raised me alone, survived poverty, loneliness, discrimination, watched her only son go to war twice and come home damaged, battled cancer, got terrorized by thugs, and through it all, she never stopped being kind, never stopped fighting for what was right, never stopped loving with her whole heart. His voice cracked. Vera squeezed his hand. She taught me that strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about how you endure it, with grace, with dignity, with love. He looked at the casket, at the bracelet gleaming on his mother's wrist. I'm going to miss her every day for the rest of my life, but I'm going to honor her by living the way she taught me, by standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves, by choosing courage over comfort, by being better than I was yesterday. He paused. Semper fidelis, Ma, always faithful, I promise. They scattered Dorothy's ashes on Route 66 near Magnolia's Diner, the place where she'd been happiest, where her stand had changed everything. Marcus stood with Rebecca and Vera and Wallace and Clayton and Garrett, with Evelyn and Frank and Henry and 200 others whose lives Dorothy had touched. The sun was setting, the sky bleeding orange and red across the desert, the same colors as that first night, full circle. As the ashes drifted on the wind, Marcus felt something shift. Not grief exactly. Recognition. His mother was gone, but what she'd built remained. The courage she'd inspired, the community she'd helped create, the legacy of standing up when it mattered. She lived on in every person Veterans Against Bullying helped, in every victim who found the strength to fight back, in every community that chose solidarity over silence. Dorothy Ann Blackwood, 1947 to 2028, wife, mother, grandmother of a movement, always faithful. 6 months after the funeral, Marcus was cleaning out Dorothy's house when he found it. The letter, the one she'd left in the safe deposit box. He'd never opened it, couldn't bring himself to while she was alive, afraid of what it might say, afraid it might feel like goodbye, but now sitting in her empty bedroom, surrounded by boxes of memories, he was ready. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside, his mother's handwriting, steady and clear. My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're sad. And you're probably blaming yourself for something, my death or the time we didn't have, or some perceived failure from 30 years ago. Stop it. I'm not having it, not even from beyond the grave. Marcus laughed through tears. I want you to know that I've lived a full life. A hard life sometimes, yes, but full. And the best parts were you. Watching you grow from a scared little boy after your father died into a strong, honorable man. Watching you serve your country, come home, find purpose again. I'm so proud of you, baby. Proud of your service. Proud of how you've battled your demons. Proud of what you built with Veterans Against Bullying. Proud that you found love again with Vera. Yes, I know you haven't proposed yet. Do it. She's wonderful. Don't let fear stop you from being happy. I want you to know that what happened with those boys at the diner, that wasn't your fault. You didn't fail me. You saved me. Not just from them, but from fear, from feeling small and helpless and old. You reminded me that I was still Dorothy Blackwood, still a fighter, still strong. And Marcus, I need you to understand something. James Morrison's death was not your fault. You were following orders in a war zone. You were 22 years old. You've carried that guilt for 35 years and it's time to let it go. James wouldn't want you to suffer for him. And Rebecca, our beautiful Rebecca, has already forgiven you. Now forgive yourself. The same goes for Sarah. Your daughter's death was a tragedy, a horrible, senseless accident, but you were serving your country. You were being the man you needed to be. And Sarah knew you loved her. She never doubted it, not for 1 second. You've spent your whole life trying to save everyone, Marcus, trying to make up for the people you couldn't save. But sweetheart, you've saved hundreds. Evelyn Frank, Trent Garrett, Henry, Rebecca, all of them are alive and better because of you. That's your legacy. That's what matters. I'm leaving you the bracelet. It's yours now. 3 generations of strong women before you, and now it's your turn to carry that strength forward. Add names to it if you want. Your daughters, Vera's if you marry her, Rebecca's. Make it a symbol of our whole family, not just the women. And Marcus, please keep fighting. Keep helping people. Keep building veterans against bullying into something that lasts. Keep being the man your father would be proud of. The man I've always been proud of. The man you were born to be. I love you with my whole heart. I always have. I always will. Now go live, baby. Live fully. Live boldly. Live without fear. You've earned it. All my love always, Mom. P.S. The money in that account. There's more than 50,000. I've been saving for 40 years. Check with the bank manager. It's all yours. Build something beautiful with it. Marcus sat on his mother's bed and read the letter 3 times. Then he held it to his chest and cried. Not from grief, from gratitude. For a mother who'd loved him unconditionally. For a life that had been hard but meaningful. For a second chance at happiness he'd never thought he deserved. When the tears finally stopped, Marcus pulled out his phone, called Vera. Hey, she answered, you okay? Yeah, I found something in my mom's letter. Oh, Marcus, how are you holding up? Good, actually good. She told me to propose to you. Vera laughed. Did she now? Yeah, said I shouldn't let fear stop me from being happy. He paused. She was right about everything, but especially about that. Marcus Blackwood, are you? Will you marry me? Silence. Then Vera's voice thick with emotion. Yes. God, yes. Of course, yes. I don't have a ring yet. I don't care about a ring. I care about you, about us, about building a life together. Even with all my baggage, especially with your baggage, it made you who you are, and who you are is the man I love. Marcus smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that reached all the way down to his soul. I love you too. Come home, Marcus. Let's start planning our future. On my way. He hung up, looked around his mother's empty house one last time. Then he took the bracelet from the dresser where Dorothy had always kept it, slipped it into his pocket, and walked out into the Nevada sunshine. The road ahead was long, still uncertain, but he wouldn't walk it alone. He had Vera, he had Rebecca, he had the veterans and volunteers and community that had come together around a simple idea that courage meant standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. He had his mother's legacy, his father's example, James Morrison's forgiveness, Sarah's memory. He had everything that mattered. And as Marcus Blackwood drove away from the past and toward the future, he thought about all the stories he'd heard, all the lives he'd touched, all the people who'd found courage in Dorothy's stand. People asked what made a hero. They thought it was about being fearless, being perfect, being stronger than everyone else. But that wasn't it. Heroes were just people who, when faced with a choice between what was easy and what was right, chose right, even when it cost them everything. Marcus Blackwood was a Marine, a Hell's Angel, a son, a man who understood that the only battles worth fighting were the ones that protected people who couldn't protect themselves. His war didn't end in the desert. It came home, and he fought it every day. Not with violence, but with service. Not with hatred, but with love. Not for glory, but because it was right. The road went on. The fight continued. But as long as there were people willing to stand in the gap, willing to say, not on my watch, there was hope. And sometimes hope was enough. The sun set over Nevada. The desert turned gold and crimson. Somewhere a Harley-Davidson engine roared to life. Marcus Blackwood rode into the future, the silver bracelet in his pocket, his mother's love in his heart, and the knowledge that he'd kept his promises. All of them. The road stretched ahead, not dark anymore, not uncertain, bright, clear, full of possibility. And Marcus rode toward it with his whole heart. Some things were worth losing everything for, and some things, like a mother's love, a family reunited, a purpose found, were worth finding everything for. The story that started with a shattered plate and a scared old woman ended with proof that one person standing for what's right can change the world. Not through violence, not through hatred, but through the simple, powerful act of refusing to let cruelty win. Marcus Blackwood had learned that lesson well, and he would spend the rest of his life teaching it to others. The road stretched ahead. He rode toward it with hope, and that made all the difference.